everybody, Sue's here from Revelation Quilts. If you're like me, you get your quilt inspiration from things other than other quilts. So I kept seeing this rug on Pinterest and it kept showing up. So I'm like, I gotta make it. So I made it. Let me show you how to do it. This will pique your interest, I think. So with these rows, you can decide how big you want your rows to be. I'm going to choose 4 inches. And so I'm going to cut a 4-inch strip from my white fabric. I'm going to use my 60-degree ruler and cut triangles from that. So I figured out that I can get 15 triangles from my 4-inch strip. So I'm just going to take my 60-degree triangle and line that right up on the 4-inch line on my triangle. And I'm going to start cutting my triangles. Excuse my arm. And I have this doubled over the width of fabric. I'm going to flip my triangle over, my triangle ruler over, and just cut out my 15 triangles from that. So I will have that, and I'm also going to have my rows be 15 white triangles across. So it works out really well for me. Now, if you want to make your triangles 5 inches, let's say you would cut a 5-inch strip and then cut your triangles out of that, and you will have less triangles than 15 because your triangles are a little bit bigger. But I chose to go with 15, which means I will have a total of 30 triangles across when I match these up with my scrappy triangles. And let me just finish getting these cut, and then I'll show you the last one. I'll have to open this fabric up to get my 15th triangle. So I'm just going to open this up like this, put my template on there, and then cut my 15th triangle just like that. And I'll have a little piece left over. So there's my 15 triangles, and that will make up half of the row. Now let's make our scrappy triangles. So when I'm cutting my strips for my scrappy triangles, I'm just going to make sure I at least have one edge that's totally straight. And I know that the first strip in the triangle needs to be at least 5 inches across, because I measured when I cut a 4-inch triangle. I know that I need at least 5 inches across here. So my second strip doesn't need to be that wide. It can be a lot shorter. So I can cut my second strip less than 5 inches. And I'm not really paying a lot of attention to how wide the strip is, just so it's a manageable width. And if you need to cut it down, you can cut it down. And I'm just going to add the second strip right to the top strip, just sewing along here. And I'm not even really paying that much attention to whether it's straight or not. It can have a little wobble to it. So let me get this one sewn on. All right, so that second strip is sewn on, and you'll notice that, you know, as I look at my 4 inches, I can get one more piece of fabric up here, and the triangle goes like this, so I don't have a lot of waste on the side. So your strips don't have to be the same length at all. And even for that third piece, I can even get away with using a square now if I want to. So I can just sew the square onto the end right here, just like that. I've pressed everything back, and now when I put my triangle on here, straighten it up a little bit, it perfectly falls within that triangle. And it really helps to use a rotating cutting mat, so I can just leave it on there just like that, rotate my cutting mat, and cut the rest of that triangle out. My template has a little square edge at the top, and I'm going to use that because it really comes in handy when you join your triangles together. So there is my little triangle, and I'm going to make 15 of those for each row. So as you can see, some of my triangles, my scrappy triangles, some have 2 strips like this one, some have 3 strips, some have 4 strips. So I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the width of the strips, and it just depends. I want a good variety of fabrics, so that works for me. So the next step we're going to do is we are going to combine, we're going to alternate our white triangles with our scrappy triangles. And so the rules I'm going to follow here are that my white triangles will always have the bottom facing the bottom of the row, and this little squared off top will be at the top. Now your 60-degree triangle might not have that squared off top on it, and that's okay. You just have to pay attention to the orientation. And when I join these together, all of my triangles will have the widest part at the top. So I'll be joining them together like this, just alternating them so that the triangles, when they facing me, they're going to look like mountains, right? So I'm just going to alternate those. However, the first one in the row we'll be using a half of a triangle so that the end of the row will have a straight edge. And so I'm going to take that first scrappy triangle and I'm going to cut it in half this way. So I know that the bottom of the triangle is 5 inches across. So I'm just going to line that up on a line on my cutting mat, and I'm going to take this is a 2.5 inch ruler, so I'm just going to put it on the edge, line it up like that with the line on my cutting mat, and I'm just going to cut that right in half. Let me make sure I got it. I do. So that's going to be 2 halves of a triangle. So when I start this row, I'm going to take my triangle here and I'm going to attach it like this. So the end of the row will have a flat edge. So I'm just going to line it up, just flip my triangles over. They should match up really well. Now, because I have that little extra squared off at the edge, a little bit of that will stick out. So I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch right down this line. So I've got that all sewn together, and my next triangle will fit just like this. And again, I can just flip it over, and this little part that's squared off will show the triangle out from underneath, but they fit together just like they're supposed to. And I'll sew again on that line, and I'm pressing all my seams in the same direction. So now my second scrappy triangle is sewn on. I'm just going to alternate the white ones and the scrappy ones. The scrappy ones will be upside down. If that's how you see it, that's how I see it. And then the white triangles will be right side up. So again, just flip over and they go together just fine, leaving that's your seam allowance, that little part that's sticking out. So your seam allowance will go right along the edge where those two meet, just like that. They're very easy to sew together. Just have to pay attention to the orientation. So just keep going with that until you have your whole row sewn together. And at the end of the row, you'll attach this second half of that little triangle piece that we cut in half to make that edge square. Now for the rows in between, what I've decided to do is make something like this. So these are 2-inch strips. This is a 1-inch strip and another 2-inch strip. So to make, and I just made it long enough, wide enough to go with the triangle rows that I have. Now this together is about 4 inches, and it's real easy to do. You just take your 2-inch strips and sew them end to end like this, right sides together. Sew them end to end until you have a strip that's long enough. Now the first couple rows I did, I used longer strips, but I decided it looked better to do shorter strips. So I made the strips, I don't know, somewhere around 6-7 inches like that. So once you get your 2-inch strip set sewn together and it's as long as you want, then you'll make a 1-inch strip set and do the exact same thing, just sew them end to end. And then after that's done, you'll do another 2-inch strip set and then just sew those 3 strip sets together until they're as long as you want them to be. And it's real easy. So then you end up with a long strip set like this. You don't have to match any seams because all the seams end up in different places. And so I found that the shorter strips, I think, look better. I'm still going to keep my long strip set in the quilt because once it's all together, you don't really notice how long or how short the strip set is. So those are my in-between rows. Call them sashing if you want to. So I'm just going to alternate this row with my triangles row, as many as I want until my quilt is as long as I want it to be. And again, you just sew as many together widthwise until your quilt is as wide as you want it to be. So it's extremely versatile. And I'm just going to alternate these with the triangle ones. And let's put it all together and see what it looks like. So there it is up on my wall. Now the rows that have just the scraps, not the triangles, but just the scraps, I made those not a lot, but I made those longer than the triangle ones so that when I went to square the quilt up, I could just square it up right along the edge of the triangles. And so I cut off the extra scraps from these so that everything's nice and straight. And the cool thing about this quilt is I noticed that it looks different whether the white triangles are pointed down or if you flip the whole thing over, the white triangles are pointing up. So I love this quilt. I'm going to call it Pique My Interest. And it used up so many of my scraps, which I love anything that uses up that many scraps. So enjoy making this. It was super fun to make. I love the way it turned out. It just looked, to me, it just looks like a bunch of strips with triangles overlaying them. And then that creates these peaks right here. So I love that part of it. If you are a member of this channel, thank you so much to my members. And don't forget to join the Revelation Quilts Guild on Facebook. I'll put a link down to that below. Get your quilty t-shirts. There's also a link for that. And enjoy this quilt. It's a row by row quilt. So that's the wonderful thing about it, is you can make it as long or as wide as you want. And so that was the best part about this for me, is you can totally tailor it to whatever size you want. So enjoy, happy quilting. Until next time, this is Suze from Revelation Quilts signing off.